What's going on, everybody? Teej back again with another video, and today we're talking about my 2023 linebacker rankings. We're getting closer and closer to the NFL draft, and hopefully you will enjoy today's video. If you do, be sure to hit that like button. It seriously would help me out a ton. If you're new around here, want to see more draft content, be sure to hit that big red subscribe button. And tell me what you think about this group. Is it one of the better position groups in this draft class in your opinion? How do you have it ranked 5 up to 1? Who are some names I maybe left off this list that should have been included in your opinion? I'd love to have your thoughts. I respond to every comment, so let's make this a conversation down below. So, obviously, we're talking linebackers next week. I said this in yesterday's video, so sorry if you already saw that. I'm going to try to do safeties and corners. I do have a wedding to go to, so hopefully I'll be able to get both those recorded. And then we're going to jump into an updated 2023 NFL mock draft. So hopefully, if you're a fan of the NFL draft, you'll hit that subscribe button, stick around with us for the upcoming content. But let's go ahead and jump into it with our 2023 linebackers. Let's go 5 up to 1. So to Marvin Overshown, I'm probably going to surprise some people here because that's not necessarily one of the biggest household names, but guy coming from Texas, taking a huge step forward this year. You look at his Pro Football Focus grade, overall at 77.3, run defense at 83.4, and coverage grade at 76.7. So that blend to be able to stop the run, but also be a factor in coverage, and doing this in the Big 12 too, not a conference necessarily known for their defense. That is certainly a huge feather in his cap. But I think the biggest difference in his game, only 1 missed tackle this year. He had 38 combined over the last 2 years, which, as a linebacker, you're naturally kind of just put in a position where you're more likely to accumulate missed tackles. But to go from 38 over the last 2 years to just 1 through a handful of weeks. Now, obviously, you're seeing this video on Sunday. Maybe that's changed a little bit with yesterday's game. Sorry, a schedule. I have to pre-record these a little bit early. But that being said, that type of improvement in his tackling on top of good production against the run, solid enough coverage ability, at 6'4", 224 pounds, I think this is a guy who's going to continue to have his stock rise. And again, doing it in the Big 12, doing it in a Power 5 conference. So I think Overshown is going to be a name you start to see a whole lot more of once we get closer and closer to the NFL draft. And I should say this off top, I don't think this linebacker group's all that great. A couple names here that I think have a shot to go in the first round. But a lot of the names I'll be talking about, and especially those in the honorable mentions, day 2, day 3 guys for sure. But let's go ahead and start talking about Henry To'oTo'o. Has improved across the board for the Crimson Tide when you look at his Pro Football Focus grades. He's already played over 2,500 college snaps, again, in a defense that's one of the best in the country, and playing under Nick Saban. So you feel pretty confident about, his ability to transition and be able to take his game to the NFL level. He's only missed 1 tackle this year. Same thing I talked about with Overshown. That's something that stands out and impresses me a ton. And that's, with him over the last 3 years having missed tackle percentages at 13 to 15%, again, relying on Pro Football Focus numbers there. So seeing him improved as an open field tackler certainly gives me more confidence about his ability at the NFL level. Granted, it is obviously harder to tackle NFL running backs than it is college running backs, but again, you're seeing progression. And like I said off top, it's grades across the board, tackling, coverage, run defense, overall, they've all kind of gone up this year. So that guy right there in the middle of an Alabama defense for Nick Saban, that's going to be something that, captures NFL teams' attention. And, kind of like Overshown, To'oTo'o, I'm not entirely sure they're first round guys, at least where we are right now here on September 23rd when I'm recording this. But that being said, don't hate the shot of taking them in the 2nd round or something like that. Then we get on to Jack Campbell here. And he's probably not going to be a first rounder either just because of his athletic limitations. I could be completely wrong here in a few months. But again, not going to wow you with his athletic ability, but the dude has enough instincts to live off of that. And not only just live off of it, be a stud off of it. So, not the only Iowa linebacker we're going to talk about today either. So that's just a really good group. And I think that allows Campbell to play that much more confident too, knowing he has Justin Jacobs right next to him. But talk about 84.3 tackling grade, solid enough coverage mark at 70.7, and body type of an NFL linebacker. And, I have to be careful saying this because I'm talking about a white kid that plays at Iowa. This is not me taking a scouting shortcut saying, the big, tall, not super athletic linebacker from Iowa is fundamentally sound, but that is his strength, right? Athleticism, not going to be able to put someone on the draft board. It's because he has it up here, and he's just sound when it comes to his technique. He does not miss a whole lot of tackles in the open field. And again, 70.7 coverage grade. That is good enough. Now, it's going to be a little bit different when you're covering NFL running backs out of the backfield and tight ends and whatnot, but him being able to do it at Iowa gives me enough confidence that it won't be a total liability at the NFL level. So that'll be something I watch and see, what are some of the things we hear from, Indy? How are NFL teams, talking about Jack Campbell? That'll be something I'm monitoring. But again, fundamentally sound, instinctual. Again, I'm not trying to take the shortcut on the white linebacker from Iowa, but that is kind of his profile, and that's what makes him an intriguing prospect. And I think if your NFL team already has like an athletic type, I'm trying to think of a good example off the top of my head, but if Jack Campbell were available to you in the second round, somewhere there in the middle parts of that round, and you already had like a Patrick Queen, let's say you're the Ravens, you already kind of have this juiced up, twitchy, athletic linebacker. Jack Campbell could be the nice compliment off of that, where it's like, hey, Patrick Queen, just focus on everything that's behind y'all. Jack Campbell will take care of everything in front of you. He'll be the guy who focuses on the run game and makes plays, again, in front of y'all at the line of scrimmage, and then we can play Patrick Queen off of that, use him in coverage. He hasn't necessarily been great in coverage in his NFL career, but I'm just trying to pair him up with a guy who's a really good athlete and could do some good stuff and cover a lot of the field, be sideline to sideline, be an impact player in coverage. I think that's a nice tandem there, potentially the NFL level, and it allows you to get the best Jack Campbell possible. Let's move on, though, as I rambled enough. Let's talk about Noah Sewell here. Awesome pass rush grade a season ago, 88.6, and it's kind of tough when a linebacker's best skill set's getting to the quarterback, but because of that, he kind of has an ability to steal the show, be the guy who wrecks a game, which, again, you're not often saying that from the linebacker position, but as awesome as he can be as a pass rusher, he's got to improve as a tackler in and of itself. So you're talking about missed tackle percentage at 12.5%, that went up to 17.9%, and then this year at 22.2%. So there are progression curves you want to see going upwards. Missed tackle percentage is not one of them, right? You want to see that going downward and downward, kind of like we talked about with Overshown and To'o earlier. So he's a violent player, and he can certainly have games where he, again, steals the show, takes the game over, especially with his pass rush ability. But if he's going to play at the NFL level, and if he's going to be a guy who goes in the first round, I've kind of thought about having some mocks where he goes like 27 to the Lions. You pair up the Sewell brothers. That's kind of a fun storyline. But if he wants to be a guy who goes in the late first, he's going to have to be better against the run. And he's going to have to be better in coverage, too, because he kind of is this loaded gun type. But it feels like, unless it's pointed to the quarterback, he has a lot of struggles, though. So I'd like to see him take steps forward in the coverage department throughout the rest of the season for Oregon. I'd like to see him get some hands on footballs, get some PBUs and some interceptions. And he's got to improve that missed tackle percentage. He's got to be better against the run. So love what he could be as a, especially if your team runs a 3-4 and Wink Martindale. This feels like a guy who could totally be a Wink dude there in the middle and bring that pass rush right up the middle, which Wink is tend to appreciate in his career. So could be someone who, if your defense, your NFL team that you're a fan of runs a defense similar to that, I think Noah Sewell could totally be a great fit, but he's got to improve in a lot of other areas. And then Trenton Simpson from Clemson comes in at number 1, and this is not a player I'm going to talk about a whole lot about because I can kind of sum him up in one sentence, and it's safety skills and a linebacker body. He's 6'3", 230, but the dude moves like a safety. His coverage abilities are that of a safety, but he also can shoot gaps, kind of like what we talked about with Micah Parsons. Now, very different players. I'm not comparing them whatsoever, but Micah Parsons' natural athleticism and instincts allowed him to just absolutely blow up run fits and get in the backfield in the snap of a finger. Trenton Simpson's got some of that. So that plus his coverage ability, playing that star backer role, which has been kind of the cornerstone piece of so many college defenses, including Brent Venables, who's obviously not there in Clemson anymore, but he has still been awesome to watch. And if you're a Vikings fan and Eric Kendricks is getting older, I think this is a great guy who could allow you to play that much more coverage shells, or maybe the Eagles ever take a chance on a linebacker in the first round. He could be a great fit. The Steelers, there's plenty of teams in the first round where his ability to be not only somebody who impacts the run game and be a traditional linebacker, but his coverage ability kind of boosts his stock when it comes to position value. Off-ball linebackers not necessarily the most coveted when it comes to position value, especially those people who weigh that heavily in the NFL draft process, like myself. But his coverage instincts and kind of being almost like a third safety out there that you can just play in the box makes him have a little bit of a boosted stock versus your random, normal, generic off-ball linebacker. So I wonder how far that propels him up draft boards and how high in the first round we see Simpson go once we get there, because we've seen Simmons go in the top 10. We've seen Devin White go in the top 5. So I kind of want to know what the ceiling is for Simpson, but a player I like a ton. And again, safety, linebacker, perfect mix, and I think Trenton Simpson is going to be the first of many that we get over the next decade or so. I think this is kind of what the NFL is going to start looking for and coveting, and body types like this are going to start playing off-ball linebacker a lot more. But anyways, there's my top 5. Let's go ahead and start talking about some of these honorable mentions. We'll start with Owen Pappoe, guy who's an awesome athlete. He's battled some injuries, which is disappointing, but with a coverage grade in the 70s, 2 of the last 3 seasons, including this year. ton of excitement about what he could be. Again, injuries are going to be a factor for sure, but he also looked really good against Penn State, not yesterday, but the Saturday before. So doing it against, you know, Power 5 school, big name opponent, that gives me hope that we're going to see that athleticism kind of take that next step forward with his production as well. Then we get to Justin Jacobs, the other Iowa linebacker, and that's no knock against Justin Jacobs because he's a really good player. Did not play, again, not yesterday, but the week prior to that. So kind of interested to see what what I actually get to see on Saturday. But where Campbell's your old school linebacker of sorts, kind of feels like he was an inside linebacker from 2 decades ago. Which can we talk about how different the NFL feels from 2003 to 2023 or 2002 to 2022? They feel like completely different, sports in and of itself. But Campbell's your old school, early aughts linebacker. Justin Jacobs is a lot more of what you're starting to see nowadays. Maybe not fully Trenton Simpson, but he's the athlete of those two. And it hasn't necessarily converted into a coverage grade. I'd like to see him get better there. But he does have, an overall grade that's pretty solid at 77 through the first 2 games, of course, not accounting what you saw yesterday potentially. But again, going back to that injury, I think it's going to be frustrating because 2021 was his first year as a starter. So if this injury lingers and he misses some games moving forward, I wonder if he just stays at Iowa and redeclares or reclassifies, not necessarily reclassifying, but ultimately just changes his timetable to the 2024 draft class, just because if last year and part of this year is all we have, that may ding his stock a little bit, and naturally, just because we don't have a whole lot of tape, maybe moves him into that day 2, maybe even round 3 conversation. So I could also see Jacobs being a guy who is like, hey, this injury kind of derailed my 2022-23 season, so let me go get another year's worth of tape, stay at school, and now Jack's gone, I can kind of be the guy that the defense, gravitates around. So I could also see that being on the table here for Jacobs. Let's move on to Justin Flo, the other Oregon linebacker, so we kind of get a couple of nice tandems here. But had a rough week 1 against Georgia, but I think that was just kind of a tough Saturday to be a Ducks fan in and of itself. But he makes up for a lot of Sewell's deficiencies, has an athletic profile that made him the #1 linebacking recruit in the 2020 class. So much of that is naturally intriguing. But again, a player I want to see better in coverage. Now, being a linebacker is such a tough assignment. We really see at the NFL level, especially, these linebackers are kind of left out to dry with RPOs and plenty of other schemes trying to target linebackers. That's what makes, when you get a Fred Warner, such a huge bolster of defense, and like that guy can change so much of what you have. And even go back further than that, with the Legion of Boom, how much Bobby Wagner did for the Seahawks on top of all the other talent they had. But that being said, I'd like to see him take a step forward in coverage. Again, that type of athletic profile, I want to see it moving sideline to sideline and backpedaling, so that's just a me thing, but it has not been a great start to 2022. But if he turns it around, this could be a guy who shoots up draft boards, especially given that athletic and recruiting background. Troy Brown from Ole Miss. This is a fun name to talk about here. So actually a transfer from Central Michigan, where he posted an elite coverage grade of 91.6, which that would be crazy for a corner. That would be bonkers for a safety. Linebackers have a little bit smaller sample size, so I can skew the number a little bit. And again, playing at Central Michigan certainly helped. A little bit of a smaller frame at 6'1", 220. Maybe that worries you a little bit, but where Simpson is, 6'3", 230, and that's ideally what you want. If it's not that, NFL teams are going to start to look at guys like a Troy Brown who are a little bit lighter but more fleet of foot and can be impact players in coverage. Again, this all comes back to being able to stop the pass. The NFL continues to put emphasis on the passing attack. Teams are going to adjust. Teams are going to make, tweaks and pivots in their draft strategy. And a guy like Troy Brown could certainly be a guy who not only gets drafted, look at Malcolm Rodriguez, too, what he's done with Detroit. Not only been great against the run, but been impactful in coverage. And Troy Brown could be the next guy. He's not quite as small as Rodriguez, but nonetheless could be another one of those guys who benefits from a Malcolm Rodriguez smaller frame. But hey, he's good in coverage, and he stuffs the run. So let's give him a shot. Doesn't matter what he looks like. So again, maybe a smidge small, but after transferring from Central Michigan, playing pretty well at Ole Miss. Not quite the same numbers what you would expect going to the SEC. You're going to see those numbers, dip a little bit. But still, how about just a 4.8% missed tackle percentage, which going from Central Michigan to the SEC, I felt like that would be a much larger number. So that's really encouraging to see him be able to make tackles, again, smaller against SEC running backs and, SEC ball carriers in general. And he's got solid grades across the board. So where they've taken a step back, they've still been respectable and solid. And it's just feeling like a guy who is going to have his fans. He's going to have his supporters in his corner. And, right now, I don't do my honorable mentions in any sort of specific order, but this could be another one of those guys that gets kind of interesting and flirts with top of round 2. If Nakobe Dean, 5'11", a little bit different of a frame than Brown, but his big criticism kept him out of the first round. Ultimately, injuries pushed him all the way down to the third. So if Brown doesn't have those injury concerns, is he a second rounder? Can he be a late first? That'll be an interesting conversation I'm trying to monitor once we get closer and closer to April. And then Dorian Williams from Tulane, 6'2", 230, solid size, been up and down as a coverage player, but to see the highs that he's once had as a coverage linebacker gets me intrigued. But the real reason Williams is on this list is just because this linebacker class is not all that deep. So it's kind of hard to, especially in September, figure out who we're going to be talking about once we get closer and closer to April. But nonetheless, Williams has had some play that's exciting, and again, an NFL body gives me hope that maybe he could be a guy who is a day 2, day 3 kind of sleeper pick that I have, somewhere. Probably not my top 100. We'll see how big I do my draft board this year, but maybe he's one of my guys once we get to that process, just because, again, he's had some success as a coverage player, and that's naturally kind of what I'm a little bit, obviously my bias is towards when it comes to these off-ball linebackers. But that is going to do it for my 2023 linebacker class, at least in the initial rankings of this group. Tell me what you think down below in the comment section. Was there a name I left off that you think I'm crazy for not having here? How would you rank this group 5 up to 1? And who ultimately do you think ends up being maybe linebacker 2? I think Trenton Simpson's got a pretty good grip on linebacker 1. Who do you think ends up being the second linebacker off the board? I'd love to hear your thoughts down below in the comments section. And it's a conversation down below. I respond to every comment, so let's talk about this group down below. Hopefully you all enjoyed today's video. If you did, be sure to hit that like button. It really would help me out a ton. If you're new around here, want to see more draft content, more football content, or just like what you saw today, just hit that big red subscribe button. That's going to do it for me. Hope you all have a fantastic rest of your day. And until next time, my name is Tej. I'm signing off.